Okay, everyone quieted down just in time, like everyone knew it was 2 o'clock. So we will call to order our regular meeting of council and start by recognizing and appreciating that we are holding our meeting today on the unceded territories of the Sishat and Hupachesit First Nations. We do have an agenda in front of us. Are there any late items from councillors? Seeing none, any late items from our corporate officer?
No, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Then would somebody like to move approval of our agenda?
Second.
Moved by Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Paulson. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. We have minutes of the special meeting held at 10:30 a.m. and the regular meeting of council held at 2 p.m. on April 25th, 2022. Somebody like to move adoption? Moved by Councillor Corbeil, seconded by Councillor Poon. Any comments on the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. And we are on to public input period, which is an opportunity for members of the public to address council on topics of relevance to City Council. We accept a maximum of 4 speakers for up to 3 minutes each. Would anyone like to speak today? Come on forward. So if you don't mind coming forward to the microphone, and then when you come forward, if you could just state your name and address for the record.
For sure. My name's spelled like Gamdor, spelled G for green, A for apple, M for mother, D for Delta, O for Oscar, R for Romeo. And my last name is Brar, B-R-A-R, and the address is 3374 4th Avenue, Port Alberni, BC. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Did you want to speak today? Sure. Come on forward.
This is my first time in the council meeting,
Sure.
so yeah. So I can go ahead right now. I put my timer on for 3 minutes. So my name is Gammy, everybody. Just moved to Port Alberni from Nanaimo not long ago. Just few things I'd like to address. Me and my family, we're having a hard time analyzing the streets. There's no paint laneway on the, especially my wife, she went for ICBC test and she failed twice because there's all the laneway of the roads, there was no distinguish. There's no divider in that. It's very hard for people to drive either left or right. People who born and raised in Port Alberni seem normal for them. But for me, who grew up in India and moved here 10 years ago, it's really difficult for me to drive in Port Alberni streets. So that's my concern is. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for coming today. We don't normally provide input, but I will just let you know, because it's a question we've been getting a lot, that we have secured a contractor for line painting this year. There was a paint shortage last year, so we recognize it's a priority, and a lot of updating should be getting done in the very near future. Thank you. Would any other, come on forward, Sandy.
Hi, my name is Sandy McCruer, and my address is 4728 Southgate Road. I know you know what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to invite all the councillors here and whoever else is here, and everybody out there, hi, to a town hall on May 16th, upstairs at the Athletic Hall. It's at 7:30, and it has to do with the proposed, unofficially proposed development on the Bird Street Ponds. And just to let you know, the way it's going to work is we're going to have a series of speakers who are very interested in it. The SAN group has contacted me, and they will not be able to attend, but they say toward the end of June they'll be able to have public meetings, kind of thing. So that's fine. I guess we'll have another public meeting, and it might be the official one. Who knows? And so I've been advised that none of the council speakers, as council members, will be speaking, and that's fine. What we want is for you just to hear us, and you don't have to express any any opinions other than it's nice out or something. You asked. You suggested, Madam Mayor, that Scott Smith might give an update as to where we are, but maybe not. And I'll have some things to say as well. I've asked the First Nations to show up, and they haven't responded. I don't know whether we'll be hearing from them at all. They can speak if they want. I know that the Hupachesit has a woodlot on the border of the property in question. And then we're going to have an open mic, and people can say what they like. There'll be refreshments and a petition and other stuff. So I hope you can all come. I'm not, we want to keep it friendly. We don't want any trouble, of course. And so that's really all I have to say. Thanks for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Sandy, and I can chat with you more about this afterward, but I will speak and provide just a general update on behalf of the city. Thanks.
Madam Mayor, may I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there a policy if a quorum of council shows up to a public event like this? Is that allowed, or what is the policy on that?
Twyla?
Thank you. It would be seen if there was 4 or more members of council in attendance that one could consider that a quorum of council.
So we can have more communication about that afterward as well. Okay, are there any other members of the public who would like to speak today? Okay, seeing. We will move on to delegations, and the first one is Corey from MNP Chartered Accountants, here to provide our audited financial statements for 2021. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you to the council for inviting me here to speak to you today. I have a short presentation on your financial statements and a little bit about our audit and the audit results. There we go. So diving right in. So we have completed the audits, and thank you to staff at the city for helping to prepare the financials and get the information ready for us. A reminder that when we're talking about the financial statements here today, we're talking about them on what we call a consolidated basis. So this is the operations, capital, and reserve all together throughout the year. When you get presentations from your staff, sometimes those things are broken up. This is everything all together. We'll start with a snapshot of the statement of financial position at December 31st, 2021. So what was in the accounts at the end of the year for the city. You can see cash and investments had just shy of $33 million. There's total financial assets of $40.5 million. Debt being paid down by the city of $13.4 million, and total liabilities, including payables and other items, of $32.2 million. So if you subtract the total liabilities from the total financial assets, you get what we call the net financial asset position, and that is a positive $8.2 million. The tangible capital assets, the physical assets, roads, water, sewer, buildings, equipment being maintained and managed by the city, have a book value of $143.8 million. And the accumulated surplus at the end of the year was $152.7 million. I will get into that, the breakdown of the accumulated surplus, in a future slide. Looking then at the statement of operations, so this is the activity throughout 2021. Total revenues for the year were $40.3 million, down a bit from the prior year's 45. However, remember 2020 had some pandemic grants and other pots of funding coming through from the province to help support throughout the pandemic year of 2020. On the expenses side of things, $38.5 million for 2021, which is a small increase from the $36.6 in 2020. And then on an accounting basis, the city had an annual surplus of $1.8 million at the end of 2021. Unwinding all the accounting adjustments and things that go on in the financial statements, I'd like to look at the cash flow statement next. This is a little bit more in line with how you're thinking when you're looking at budget. So this is the main areas of cash flows for the city for 2021. $11.9 million brought in by operations, $16.4 million of capital spending throughout the year, an increase from the 13.5 in the prior year. Net cash transferred out of investments into the general accounts of $6.5 million, and debt being paid down on schedule of $364,000. So at the end of the year, the main bank accounts actually had a net cash inflow of $1.7 million. I promised that I would explain what's in accumulated surplus. So the $152 million is mostly the equity in the physical assets, the $130 million. There's also $26 million set aside in reserves, Capital fund has a $21 million surplus, and operating fund has a $25 million negative value. Switching gears, you have a draft audit report in your packages today. We're happy to be able to provide what we call an unmodified opinion. That is an auditor language for a clean audit opinion. We're ready to sign the report today after council approval. And actually, I just got the email that most of those minor outstanding matters are squared away. So council approval will be the final step. When we look at our audit and go through the audit process, we look at controls at the city to ensure that you're getting accurate financial reporting. We sample transactions throughout the year. We don't look at every transaction. There's just far too many going on through the year for us to look at everything. And then we use a number called materiality to drive our audit testing. And for the city this year, that number was $1.5 million. So that's calculated as roughly 4% of your annual revenue. That's how we come up with that number. We look at every transaction over that number, and then we sample underneath. For our engagement status, we didn't find anything unusual to report back to council, no irregularities, no evidence of conflict of interest or unusual transactions. Again, a thank you to management and staff for helping us go through the audit process this year. They're fantastic to work with. Confirm that we are independent with respect to the city as of today's date. So that independence covers from January 1st, 2021, all the way through to today, the last day of the audit process. And I'll wrap up by going back into the numbers a little bit. So we started off looking just at 2021. We'd like to end looking at trends over the last 4 or 5 years to see if there's any indicators of where things are going with your finances. So we start by looking at a ratio we call sustainability. So here you're looking at the financial assets, cash and receivables, things that you can turn into cash, and compare it to your liabilities. So it's a rough liquidity measure for the city. Here we're looking for that magic number of 1. If that number dips below 1, that means you are taxing or raising revenues in the future to pay for the past. When it's above 1, you have funds and reserves available to pay for future projects. So for the city in 2021, this ratio was 1.26. It has been decreasing. From 2017, it was 2.1. But the main reason for the decrease is actually on this next slide, which is the significant capital projects and capital work that's happened over the last few years. So the last ratio we look at, we call it a flexibility ratio. If this ratio and the infrastructure that you're managing starts to get very outdated, you get less flexibility because you're having to spend a lot more money there. So we look at the depreciated value of the capital assets and compare it to the original cost as a rough indicator of age. Again, not a full asset management picture. This doesn't consider the condition of assets or the timelines for replacement, just roughly how old is it. So in 2021, the carrying value of the capital assets is 55.1%. This ratio has been increasing since 2018, where it was 50.6. So these ratios are crossing each other, which makes sense. You're spending in significant amounts on capital improvements and projects at the city. So thank you for the chance to present to you today, but I would be happy to answer questions if there are any.
Thank you very much. Are there questions from council? Councillor Corbeil.
Yeah, Corey, thank you for that report. When you talk about capital assets, are you talking about things such as infrastructure, the sewer, the water, things of that nature?
Yes, thank you, Councillor. Absolutely. Roads, water, sewer, buildings, equipment, anything you can touch. And I know that your public works and engineering and all those departments are managing and maintaining those. Yeah.
Other comments? Okay. Seeing no more questions, thank you very much for the presentation. Very helpful, and for all of your team's work on the audit this year. Council, we do have a suggested motion. Would somebody like to read it out? Councillor Paulson.
I'd like to move that the auditor's report and the 2021 audited financial statements prepared by MNP Chartered Accountants be received and approved as presented.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Solda. Seeing no additional comments, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. We'll move on to our second delegation, and that is Peter Muggleston and Bill Collette, and I'm not sure if Callum is here also, Pat Deacon, on behalf of the Municipal and Regional District Tax Program to provide an update. And I just want to say that this is a strategic initiative of Council. It's something that is specifically identified in our corporate strategic plan, and a lot of work has been done on it by the people standing in front of us over the last few years. So just want to recognize the work that you guys have done, and we really appreciate having an opportunity to hear an update. Thank you.
I think I can probably sit down again then, because the first point to note was that the MRDT is listed as strategy 2.1.2 in Council's 2019-2023 corporate strategic plan. And I have the fortune of being able to thank Peter Muggleston from Alberni Valley Tourism, Bill Collette of the Alberni Valley Chamber of Commerce, Callum Matthews, Tourism Vancouver Island. Actually, it's now 4VI. They've just changed their name. And with the assistance of the mayor and Councillor Haggard, who also visited some of the accommodation providers to bring this along. Peter and Bill are going to say a few words each, and then Callum had thought he was going to be able to zoom into the meeting, so I will finish with his presentation.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and Council. I'm Peter Muggleston. I'm the Chairman and President of Alberni Valley Tourism. In 2019, Alberni Valley Tourism engaged Tourism Vancouver Island to facilitate an application for the MRDT. AVT will be the designated recipient of the MRDT as it qualifies as the eligible entity. And there's 4 categories that need to be met in order to be the eligible entity. It's a non-for-profit business and incorporated under the Society Act, have a place of business in the designated accommodation area, and also be involved in tourism marketing. And we also, which is the key, we also need approval from municipalities and the regional districts in the area in order to, of the accommodation area. Although we have some property still sitting on the fence, we've achieved a majority of accommodation providers. We have 12 of 17 properties in Port Alberni, which represent 71%. And the key also in this area is we need to achieve 51%. So we've met that mark. We also have another part, and again, we have to meet 51% of this also, which is the total rooms. And we have 330 rooms out of 410, which represent 80%. We also have engaged in the regional district. Bamfield was not a success. They chose not to participate. But we do have one area, Area D is Sprout Lake, which 2 out of the 3 properties will qualify to sign on, have done so. And they represent 20 or 75% and 23 of 27 rooms of 85%. So hopefully we can get the regional district also. Sprout Lake is a part of our area, and we market it, AVT market it presently now. So AVT has held the visitor marketing space since 2012 through a destination marketing fee of 2%. And we ceased that 2% in January of 2021. We are still actively marketing the area and have funds to do so until the MRDT funds start rolling in. We continually update our website We have a new website, which we had in 2019. We still do work on it. Any of the content, what we bring in on a yearly basis goes onto our website. AVT and the City of Port Alberni have partnered on many projects, and we also produce content which from the visitor area. We have received funds from Destination BC to assist in our marketing of the projects what we participate in. That definitely helps. And although understanding the MIT has been an initiative of your council, we will be asking for support, a letter of support, so we can, that's one of the initiatives also. And thank you, and I will give it to Bill.
Thank you, Peter.
Madam Mayor and Council, I won't take much time here because Pat does have a presentation, but I did want to say that this is the Chamber of Commerce. We don't work with 1.12, 1.13, or whatever. This is objective number one for us. So we're really pleased that that we've been quite successful in our pursuit of this. As Peter pointed out, 80% of the number of rooms represented, including 45 rooms today that signed on. So really pleased with that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Pat. Thanks.
Thank you. Twyla, would you please? Oh, thank you. So I'm jumping right into it. Here's the program overview. It is a visitor-funded provincial tax program which was established in the 80s to support the growth and management of tourism. Most places around British Columbia, most places on Vancouver Island have it in place. There's a tax rate of either 2% or 3% levied on fixed room accommodation properties. In our case, we've chosen to go 2 to start, and it must be renewed every 5 years, which requires approval from both the accommodation sector and municipal governments. The process is laid out here. I'm not going to read through it, given that we're approaching our time limit, but it does cover off governance, partner and industry engagement, industry support, local government support, strategic business plan, which we have done, and I would say it's in the penultimate phase, so we're very, very close to having completed that. And once that's done, and once we have the resolutions from both governments, we will be submitting that. The strategy highlights increased tourism-related spending and revenues, diversify seasonality and markets, make our decisions based on research, data, and continue visitor services. And the tactical plan highlights, you can see there, traditional marketing, digital marketing, travel, media, and trade relations, asset development and research. We have been doing all of that through the period of time that MRDT has not been in place, but this additional funding will allow us to up our game. So here's how we're proposing to invest the funds. Again, it's a visitor funded program. The accommodations do obviously have an administrative load to bear in it, but we're anticipating that it would be broken down largely into marketing, operations, and engagement, with smaller investments in asset development and research. So our next steps are securing the letters of support and resolutions, submitting the application, awaiting approval from the provincial cabinet. Delighted to say that the wait time is down from 9 months to 4 to 6, and then a strategy launch. So that's the presentation. If there's any questions, did I close you out? End of story. Mic
Thank you.
drop.
Presentation over.
Yeah.
Thank you, Pat. Are there questions from council? Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to thank the three of you gentlemen here because it's been a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, I know, for the last few years getting to this stage. So thank you so much for all of your hard work. And I think that if this gets final approval, you know, 6 months from now, I hope we can all celebrate together. But at that point, when money does start coming in, we are going to have a substantial advertising budget in order to promote all the wonderful things that this community has to offer to our visitors. And I think we can finally start to become a destination point, not just a drive-through. So thank you again for your work.
Thank you, Councillor Haggard. Councillor Solda.
I just want to say kudos to all three of you. I remember, Peter, that you and I sat in the office talking about that because I was on the Chamber of Commerce Board years back. And to come this far and everybody's working together, it's great. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you, gentlemen.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none. We do have a motion written in our agenda, but there has been a bit of a change, so I'm going to read out the suggested motion. It is that the City of Port Alberni supports the Alberni Valley Tourism Association's application to apply for the Municipal and Regional District Tax, MRDT, at the rate of 2% within the boundaries of the City of Port Alberni and Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District electoral areas B, D, E, and F to support tourism marketing programs and projects.
I'll second that, Madam Mayor.
Seconded by Councillor Haggard. Seeing no additional comments, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay. We will move on to unfinished business, and we have one item, and that is an audit committee minutes. Twyla, did you want to speak to this?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just by way of explanation, the terms of reference has that council approve the audit committee minutes. Because the audit committee meets quarterly, staff have been taking the opportunities to place those minutes on the council summary for information. And then once they've gone back to the audit committee and they're adopted, the practice will then be to bring them back to council to approve. So the October 6th minutes that are attached to the agenda were simply received for information, and they're now positioned to be approved by council. The November minutes never found their way to council at this point, but the audit committee has adopted those, so they're here for council approval. And your February 28th audit committee minutes, while they've been received by council for information, they have yet to find their way back to the audit committee for approval. So that will take place May 24th, I believe, and that will be the process going forward. So here for council approval at this point.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there questions or comments? Councillor Washington, would you like to read this motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that Council for the City of Port Alberni approve the Audit Committee meeting minutes dated October 6 and November 8, 2021.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Poon. Seeing no comments, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. We will move on to staff reports. Item number 1 is accounts. Councillor Washington again.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the certification of the Director of Finance dated May 9, 2022 be received and checks numbering 150443 to 150530 inclusive in payments of accounts totaling $1,220,191.03 be approved.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Solda. All in favor? Carried. None opposed. And we'll be on to the second report, which is an RCMP department update from our officer in charge, Inspector Rochette. Welcome, Inspector Rochette. And before you start, I did just want to express thanks on behalf of Council for the really significant step that was taken with arrests on the Dante Lucas case. And just know that we have heard you know, for years, how difficult of a case that was on the officers and members as well, obviously, as the public. And so just really appreciate the continued commitment to that. And yeah, I know a lot of people in the community are very grateful and very thankful that that step has been taken.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, council members, I'm just going to go over the numbers for the first quarter of 2022. I'm going to look at some of the statistics, as well as I'm going to make some comments, and then I'll open the floor for questions. So from January to March 2022, we received 2,896 calls for service. 2388 of these calls occurred within the city of Port Alberni. The number of criminal offenses are up by 27% compared to the same quarter last year. Property offenses are up by 28%, and theft from vehicles are down by 23%. Further on in my report, I'll break it down a little bit more so we can discuss some of the increase that we've witnessed in the first quarter. The number of domestic reports are down by 20% if you compare the same quarter in 2021. Like I mentioned, calls for service were 2,388, so it's decreased by 7% compared to the same quarter last year. Violent crime have gone up from 128 to 131, so basically the same as the same quarter last year. Like I mentioned earlier, property crime have gone up from 301 to 387, so it's an increase by 29% for the city of Port Alberni. And other criminal code, we've seen a significant increase from 168 to 249, which is an increase by 48%. Drug offenses, 20 to 12, and the total of criminal code have gone up from 629 to 799. Criminal traffic, which mainly is impaired driving under the criminal code or driving while prohibited, we've seen an increase from 12 to 29, which is an increase of 142% for the quarter. Now to break it down a little bit further, when you look at violent crime, look at assaults, we've seen an increase from 70 to 85, which is an increase of 21%. Harassment have gone down from 15 to 6. Robbery are mainly the same, 2 to 1. Sex offenses, when we talk about sex offenses, is we're looking at sexual assaults, sexual interference, and so it's remained the same, 15 to 15. Uttering threats, 22 to 23. What we've seen a decrease of is domestic violence, which has gone down from 30 to 24, which is a decrease of 20%. When I mention assaults, 85, including assaults is domestic violence. So out of 85 reported assaults, 24 of them were related to domestic violence. When you look at property crime, like I mentioned earlier, there's been a significant increase when you look at property crime. You break it down a little bit further here with auto theft. It's gone up from 6 to 9. Bike theft has remained the same from 8 to 8. If you look at break and enters, business has remained the same, 7 to 7. Residents have gone up from 5 to 6, and break and enter the other, 10 to 7. So the totality of break and enters for the first quarter 2022 is 20 compared to 22 last year. So a slight decrease if you compare to same quarter last year. When we look at mischief to property, which is vandalism, that's someone that had the biggest impact on as to why we've seen such an increase in property crime, is we've seen the numbers going up from 125 to, I think on the report it says 127, but it's actually 177. So we've seen an increase of 42% on vandalism. So that has the biggest impact as to why property crime has been, we've seen an increase for the first quarter. Theft has gone up slightly from 58 to 64. Possession of stolen property, 5 to 4. And then another property crime has gone up significantly is shoplifting, 20 to 48. So it's an increase by 140%. Theft from vehicles have gone down from 31 to 24, and fraud has basically remained the same from 26 to 29. If you look at other criminal code, and I mentioned earlier that it's gone up by 48%, the main reason is the increase in cause disturbance, which has gone up from 74 to 107, so which is an increase of 45%. Breach probation has slightly gone down from 21 to 14, and breach of bail is 50 to 43. So as you can see, obviously, cause disturbance, the increase of 45% is a direct impact on the increase for the quarter of 48%. Some of the I just want to make a couple comments in regards to some of the investigations we've been involved during the first quarter. Obviously, you mentioned Dante, which has been an ongoing effort for the last 4 years. There's been a lot, obviously, work done the last few months that culminated with the arrest a few days ago. But as well as we emphasize a few suspects in relation to property crimes. We've arrested 3 well-known individuals, the prolific offenders within the community. They were all charged with several charges with possession of stolen properties or break and enter. There's one that was charged with possession of a weapon, possession of break-in instruments. He was recently sentenced to 2.5 months in jail and 2.5 years probation. So he's currently in custody. And once he'll be released, he'll be on a no-go Port Alberni. So that's one thing I'm quite pleased to see is, and I've mentioned before in previous meetings that the local judge or the judges have been pretty good, supportive of the detachment community. If someone is not from Port Alberni and they commit offenses in Port Alberni, when they get released, there's a no contact or no go to Port Alberni. Sometimes it's even, I've seen, if they're not from Vancouver Island, we've seen no go Vancouver Island as well. Just a comment on another individual that we arrested. Faced several charges for, again, I mentioned possession of stolen property, break and enters, theft from motor vehicle, theft under. He entered a guilty plea and was sentenced to 1.5 years incarceration. So, you know, it's going to have a direct impact on when we look at property crimes. There's another individual that was recently arrested late March for a break and enter, which stole several laptops from a local company. So that was valued at $3,000. And so he was just recently released. He's facing charges, but again, he was released on a no-go Port Alberni. So we were quite pleased with that. So it's going to have, again, a direct impact on when you look at the statistics for break and enters. Another comment I'd like to make is the first 2 months of the quarter, we focused on a drug project that we've been working on for several months, and the funding that we were able to obtain in regards of establishing the project was through civil forfeiture, when you can apply to what they call PTEP, the Provincial Target Enforcement Program, and you request a certain amount of money that you may use for a project, and then you have to establish priorities and objectives, and so we're able to secure funding for that, and so in February, March, and it was led by our crime reduction unit. We had a project ongoing in regards of drug enforcement. It's not fully completed. We still have a bit of work left to do, but just as an example, one individual was arrested during that project and is currently facing 20 charges for several of them are related to trafficking, illicit drugs. And when I talk about trafficking, I'm talking about trafficking fentanyl, meth, cocaine, and we've seen during that project, we seized from that individual 1 kilo of cocaine, a significant quantity of fentanyl, half a kilo of meth as well. We seized a vehicle, which we're able to obtain forfeiture to the province, so that individual will not recover the vehicle, and which for a value of about $30,000. And that's something we try to focus on is, you know, the impact of if you're able to seize assets that are used in the commission of an offense. It's always a big win. I think it has a bigger impact sometimes is when you compare to some sentencing. And during one of the search warrant, we seized a handgun in one of the vehicles as well. And We seized in total so far $65,000 in cash. And so like I mentioned earlier, the project is led by my crime reduction unit, which consists of 2 officers at this point. So, and keeping in mind during this project, it's still have all the other files we're working on, including the Dante matter and plus all other major other investigations. I'm currently in the process of sending a report and putting a report together requesting seasonal policing money from the province. And usually a big majority of the funding is used outside the city of Port Alberni. We're looking like at Sprott Lake for a boat patrol, the inlet. Obviously, we're keeping an eye on the building of the new road, improvement of the road to Banfield, and see the impact it's going to have as far as that community for calls for service. But I have a chance to sit down with Chris Baker, and we discussed the possibility of working with bylaw, doing joint bike patrols within the downtown core. So that's going to be part of our the report I'm going to submit to the district office, and hopefully we'll get some funding. And the money is usually I have until Friday to submit my report. I'll know the decision by June 1st, and you have until September 6th to use the funding and report back as to if you achieve any of the objectives that you put into your report. That's all I have right now. If I'm open, the floor is open for any questions or concerns, or comments.
Thank you. Councillor Paulson and then Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Inspector O'Shea, for your report. Been sitting in this chair for 7 years, and it's interesting to watch these reports come through and realizing that certain individuals are quite responsible for some of these categories, and watching the incidents go up, and when they're locked up, the incidences come down. And I'm really, really pleased to hear that a couple of individuals have a no-go Port Alberni as a result of your hard work and stuff. But it is interesting to see that ebb and flow of as they come out of jail and then they go back in jail, and they're definitely repeat offenders. And I know it's frustrating for you that they're out and redoing their business again, but keep up. Just keep grinding away at those guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Haggard. And then
Thank you,
Councillor
Madam
Corbeil.
Mayor. Thank you for the report, Inspector Bichette. I'm always happy to have you come to council and hear about these kinds of stories. I think your team does a fantastic job with the limited resources that you do have available. One statistic that I was very happy to see was the downward trend in domestic violence. Can you attribute that to anything, or is there something special that your team is doing to account for this, or is there anything happening in the community that's helping with this?
I don't think it's anything specific, as we've been working closely with, I'm part of the community action team, and so the ACAUS are present at the meeting, and I've been working with them. As you know, we're staying in communication every so often. We have that social navigation program that's been quite successful in regards to that as well, dealing more towards indigenous population. But as far as this specifically, like it's you know, yes, the numbers are down, but I think we have to be realistic. It's up and down, like Ron just mentioned. Is so that's what we're kind of trying to keep. The main thing is we're trying to stay. We have a full-time violence relationship investigator. So. But at this point, unfortunately, he's not full-time because he needs to do other things. But that's the objective, is trying to have someone full-time that can really focus and really work with the stakeholders and trying to come with, we try to see a decrease in calls for service because we can address some of the issues prior to, I know, because we were well aware that when there's a call to police, it's probably been ongoing for several months, if not several years. So we try to reach out to possible victims prior to, if at all possible.
Thank you. Councillor Corbeil.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Inspector Rochette, for your report. Councillor Paulson touched on this. As you're probably well aware, a number of mayors, I think 13, went to the provincial government to have them do something about repeat offenders. And you mentioned in your report, you know, repeat offenders. And they've set a little two-person committee, one being a former Vancouver City Police officer, and I believe the second person's a criminologist. And their mandate is to look into repeat offenses in property crime and as well with random attacks. Is that something that the city of Port Alberni should be concerned about? It sounds like property crime for sure, but how about the random attacks? And if you could comment on that. Thank you.
No, for sure. When you look at property crimes, it'd be interesting to see what's going to be the scope of that review. Like, I'm expecting that we will get emails in regards of providing some data and some comments as far as what's going on within the city of Port Alberni. It may be obviously within Vancouver Island. As far as when you talk about random attack, it's something that it's quite rare. If you look at all the assaults file, usually they're known to each other. It's not that it does happen, but since my time here, it hasn't been something that you've seen on a regular basis, the odd incident for sure. But I was quite pleased to hear, like, it's a retired deputy chief, I think, is going to be part of that committee. So we'll see. It's brand new. It's just was announced a week ago, so we'll see. But I'm expecting to receive some information regards that, and we'll be able to participate in that. On a side note too, I didn't put in my notes, but I have a meeting before the end of the week in relation to body-worn cameras. So I know I've been asked in the past, and it's been a little bit longer than expected as far as to see how it's going to roll out. But I have a meeting scheduled for Thursday afternoon, so I should know more then. And if there's anything substantive or important that comes out of that meeting, I'll make sure to relay that to the city, so you're well aware, and as well as relation to possible costs related to that. So.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, would somebody like to move receipt of this report? Moved by Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Corbeil. All in favor? Carried. Thank you, Inspector.
Thank you very much.
Okay, moving on to item number 3 from the Director of Parks, Recreation and Heritage. We have award of tender number 003-22, Port Alberni Train Station roofing.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The city engaged a construction manager, MKM Projects Limited, to coordinate and manage the structural upgrades to the existing train station. The construction manager issued a public invitation to tender in March of 2022 for a number of trade contract services, including that of a roofing contractor for the city-owned train station. And per our local purchasing policy, an award of construction proposals over $75,000 in value, even with pre-existing budget approval, must be approved by council. So staff recommend today that council for the city award the invitation to tender for the Port Alberni train station trade contractor for the roofing to RAM Roofing Limited in the amount of $117,800 plus GST, with funds coming from the 2022 capital plan train station project.
Thank you. Are there questions? Councillor Solda.
Can you tell me where RAM is? Are they from Port Alberni?
No, so they are not a local provider. And Madam Mayor, our construction manager had actually reached out to a variety of roofing proponents. It's always discouraging when there's not, we'd love to see handfuls of bids arrive during the process. So our construction manager did reach out to a variety of proponents, and we did only receive the one bid.
Well, I guess our Port Albernians are really busy.
Yes.
Thank you. Not a lot of cedar. Okay. Tells you what I know.
Thank you. Seeing no other comments, Councillor Solda, would you like to read the motion?
Okay, Madam Mayor, I move that the Council for the City of Port Alberni award invitation to tender number 003-22, Port Alberni Train Station Trade Contractor Cedar Shake Roofing to RAM Roofing Limited in the amount of $117,800 plus GST and funds coming from the 2022 capital plan train station project.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Poon. Seeing no comments, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 4 from the Director of Finance. We have BC Transit Annual Operating Agreement.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So annually, we bring forward the request to renew the annual operating agreement for our BC Transit service that is provided for the city. This is also within our financial plan, and the amounts that are within this contract are also in the 2022-2026 financial plan. With that, so there is some remaining restart funds that the senior levels of government have provided to enable that safe restart from COVID. And these funds amounted to approximately about $30,000 in the 2022 year, ending March 31st, 2022. Obviously, with the BC Transit fiscal year, it runs from April 1st to March 31st of every year. So with that, Council has some options, but we've been in this contract for many years, and it is identified in the financial plan, and we're asking that Council support the recommendation today.
Thank you. Are there any questions from Council? Okay, seeing no questions, Councillor Corbeil, would you like to read this motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the Mayor and the Director of Corporate Services be authorized to execute the BC Transit 2022-2023 annual operating agreement between the City of Port Alberni and British Columbia Transit as attached to this report, and in effect from April 1st, 2022 to March 31st, 2023.
Seconded by Councillor Poon. Seeing no comments on this, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Item number 5, from the Manager of Planning, we have official community plan update. Welcome, Marianne.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and good afternoon, Council. I'm before you today with an update on our OCP review project that is underway and outlining some steps for moving forward. As Council is aware, this contract was awarded to McElhaney in October 2021, and they came before Committee of the Whole in January 26, outlining 6 phases to the project, and had begun phase 1 and 2 since that time, and we are now at phase 3. Since that time, they've had some changes in their staffing, and the community engagement specialist is no longer with McElhaney. So staff has proposed to work with Frank Planning Collaborative, and Frank Planning Collaborative has worked with Kevin Brooks of McElhaney before, so they do have a working relationship and have addressed some other OCPs as well. So staff is moving forward with Frank Planning Collaborative to move forward the project. So what I wanted to do is outline that we are now in phase 3, which is our visioning and community priorities. And I've got a schedule here before you, and we're outlining everything in gray as when we have our touchstones with council moving forward. And everything in green is engagement with the community. And the orange is staff working with the consulting team to prepare reports and documentations as we move forward. The goal is that we would work over this next week towards a June 2nd stakeholders meeting to address vision and guiding principles. We would flesh that out, and we would bring that forward to council on June 20th, where council would provide direction to staff on the vision and guiding principles and a community engagement plan to take forward to the community to test the vision and the community priorities that week of June 21st to July 1st. We would analyze that and then bring that back towards council on August the 8th with a proposed vision and guiding principles for council to consider. The implications of this are that in the contract awarded to McElhaney, we will be doing some revisions and reallocating funds, reducing their contract to cover the cost for bringing on board Frank Planning Collaborative. And staff will come back with a further update as to the timing of the whole project at a later date. So staff is seeking endorsement as per the recommendation before you today to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there questions? Okay. Councillor Poon, would you like to read this motion?
Yes, I'll move that Council endorse the revisions as reflected in the staff report dated May 2nd, 2022 to Phase 3, Vision and Community Priorities as part of the Communications and Engagement Plan within the Official Community Plan Review and Update.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Solda. Not seeing any more questions. I just want to say I'm really looking forward to seeing the outcomes of this phase and this piece of the process. So hope we get a really good turnout to the community session. Would that be in person or
Yes,
in-person session?
we're going to do various tools.
Great.
So it won't be just one tool.
Yeah.
And we'll use Let's Connect, and we will be bringing things out on that, and then pop-ups, et cetera. So there'll be
Great.
various forms.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay.
With that, on the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 6 from the Director of Corporate Services, we have extend licenses to occupy. Twyla.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So one of City Council's responses to the COVID-19 pandemic was creating the opportunity for commercial operators to extend their operations onto public lands, and essentially that was city sidewalks. This was achieved when Council established guidelines associating with occupying public space, as well as a formal license to occupy agreement, albeit it was on a temporary basis. The Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch also amended their policies to permit that expanded service area. The latest direction from Council as these extensions continued throughout since the onset of the pandemic was for the city to establish permanent or guidelines that would make these temporary occupancies permanent. So we've now since received another update from the Liquor Control Branch that they're doing another amendment and a new extension all the way through to March of 2023. So in June of 21, the city was advised that the LCRB policy directive was going to be repealed, and a new policy directive that would take us to June 1st. Now we find ourselves in a receipt of another new policy directive, 2205, which gives the GM of the LCRB the ability to extend TESA authorizations to March 31st, as I just indicated. Staff will continue to work on formalizing criteria, including an application process that would see the temporary expansion areas become permanent. And the only difference that we're pointing out now at this time is the fact that we want to grant these extensions, but work with two businesses that are somewhat impeding pedestrian flow. So in this case, we have Twin City Brewery and Alberni Brewing, that there is some impacts to pedestrian flow. So staff are currently working with the owners of Twin City to make adjustments so that the new extensions, when we enter into them, will not impede pedestrian access on the sidewalk. And same with Alberni Brewing. It's actually just a city sign that's installed on the sidewalk that's preventing that safe pedestrian flow.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Corbeil.
Just a question, could to prevent the impeding of pedestrians, could it be as simple as adding a wooden sidewalk around a structure? Would that fit that definition?
No, sorry, apologies. I don't think in the case of the Twin City, if we put the sidewalks out in the absence of formalizing our guidelines, you're pushing people out into parking spaces on the roadway. So staff are working on amending some of their improvements, like their tent, for example, on one of the sidewalks to allow that flow. And yeah, does that help?
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, great.
The genie's out of the bottle. I'm happy now.
Okay. Councillor Haggard, would you like to read this motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move that Council of the City of Port Alberni extends its endorsement of the city's guidelines for temporary sidewalk patios and use of the license to occupy agreement until March 31st, 2023, while the city continues to work on establishing criteria that commercial operators will be required to meet in order to be considered permanent.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Seconded by Councillor Washington. Seeing no comments on this, all in favor? Carried. Thank you.
I'd like to move that Council authorize staff to extend current executed licenses to occupy up to March 31st, 2023, aligning with the LCRB Policy Directive number 2205, dated April 7th, 2022, subject to licensees being required to remove any materials and/or brooms located in the expended areas that impede safe pedestrian access.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Paulson. Seeing no additional comments, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. And on to item number 7 from the Director of Corporate Services. We have communications support and award of statement of work. Tyler.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So bit of a sad heart reading this report, but in January of this year, the city's manager of communications returned to work on a part-time basis, and that individual was giving us 20 hours per week, and it was intended that the individual would return to full-time by mid-April. To assist the manager of communications in meeting the demands of the department during that time frame, we engaged the services of Zinc Strategies to provide that support. With the resignation of the communications manager just recently, and until such time as the city is able to conclude our recruitment process, the city will need communications support to assist us in this time of transition. So looking to council to consider sole sourcing and awarding this work to Zinc Communications. They've provided a contract quote price of $37,500. The reason this is coming to council, as much as we engaged Zinc for January, February, and March, with this next engagement, it would put us over the threshold in our purchasing policy. So that is why we're bringing it here to council to consider that sole source and award the work to Zinc.
Thank you. Are there questions on this? Okay, hearing none. Councillor Paulson, would you like to read this?
I'd like to move that council award the statement of work, quote, for corporate communications support to Zinc Strategies Incorporated in an amount not to exceed $37,500.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Seeing still no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. And item number 8 from the Director of Corporate Services, we have draft policy number 3002-1, Council Code of Conduct. Twyla.
Thank you. So, City of Port Alberni Council expressed their desire in exploring of code of conduct. This stemmed from a item brought forward from a resident, and council resolved to move forward with one of the steps would be to establish a code of conduct. The working group has prepared a number of supporting documents to assist councils with this work, including providing a model code of conduct. That was a recent paper put out by UBCM to act as a starting point for councils that wish to establish such a code of conduct. The model code is captured in the attached draft policy, and prior to further work on this initiative, staff are inviting further discussion with council to ensure council's objectives are met. Included with this report was a companion document that really dives deep into what council should consider if moving forward with a code of conduct. So that is more, the guide was attached to the report, and we invite council's input at this time as to how they would like to proceed.
Thank you. Really appreciate the start on this work. Council will note in the report provided that our last council actually, following an incident, our last council actually gave direction to, I'm not sure if it was formal direction in terms of a motion or just we said that we would create a council code of conduct. And then we actually never ended up moving forward with it. Election happened. It just didn't become a priority right off the bat. So the interesting thing is that, you know, we are moving very close to the end of our term, and I think we don't want to end up in that position again. At the same time, I think we want to make sure we have a council code of conduct that is meaningful to council. So I think, you know, in reading through the report, that a facilitated session to be able to build that council code of conduct is really important, rather than just signing on to, you know, a statement that we, you know, that is kind of, might feel meaningless if you're not a part of creating it. The interesting thing here, of course, is that our term is almost over. So I think it would be us creating one now and then likely that being reviewed and updated by the next council. I'm going to propose that we do go through that process now, regardless of our term being near the end. And I think that it's because I don't want to end up in the same position we did last term where we kind of direct to do the work and then it ends up not making it forward as a priority right off the bat. And I think it's really important that we do that through a facilitated session rather than just creating a document. So I've got Councillor Solda, Washington, Haggard, Poon.
Okay. Madam Mayor, reading this, I noticed there's no consequences. What happens if you do something? There's no consequences on here, and we need to have that discussion. What happens to that person? Also, it talks about, you know, everything else, but if I'm doing something, as an example, if I'm drinking and driving, I get picked up, right? That's my private life, but I'm not doing it for as a council, right? So where I'm going with this is what happened here was private. It wasn't to do, the person wasn't representing council or anything. So it has to have something about your private life in here too, because you are still in the public, no matter what. So there has to be some kind of language in there to mitigate that.
Expected to uphold the values of our council in your private life as well.
Yes.
But I think that's why, so this is just an example, right? I think that's, and some of the questions we want to ask, I think that's why we want to go through a formal session to talk these things out, to determine what, you know, is reasonable and what isn't.
I think that's important, Madam Mayor, because although you're not doing anything representing council, you're in, like in a grocery store, you're still representing council no matter what. You're elected.
Thank you. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, Councillor Solda echoed I was thinking, so what's going to happen if we do something wrong? I couldn't think of the word. I had punishment written down, but I mean, no, there's got to be something for your consequences. And to me, it's a no-brainer. That's the way I've been running it for 10 years now. It's like you go to the grocery store for the liter of milk and somebody corners you, you have to listen, you have to write down on the back of your grocery list what his concerns are and get back to them. So I think as a city councilor or city mayor, I think we're always on, so. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I totally agree. I think we should go ahead and prepare the code of conduct. And if the next council, they'll have a document in place. And if they want to tweak it a little bit, that'll be at their decision, but at least they'll have a really good starting point to follow and to start with. So I think we should move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Councillor Poon and then Councillor Paulson.
Thank you. I'm pleased that this is coming back at such a good pace. I think above all else, the policy needs to be clear expectations and clear consequences. Thank you.
Councillor Paulson.
I totally agree with, I don't think the election cycle should really come into bearing in this one. I think we move forward with it. And certainly a new code of conduct. I think the sketch outline of the code of conduct is very, very good, but it specifically refers to our code of conduct as we're doing business as council, whether it be in our meetings or in the public. And I do believe that it needs to make reference to the code outside of council that will directly affect the public perception of council and staff. And I think we need to protect the integrity of the office. And the other one is, I know we've got some guidelines here that you presented, but UBCM's been working on a guideline. I don't know if we've had a look at the UBCM guidelines for code of conduct, but that's for their organization, but it is directed at elected officials. So maybe there's some stuff in there that we could plagiarize, if you will. But yeah, move forward, and this would be great to get behind us.
Thank you. Councillor Corbeil.
Well, just on what Councillor Paulson said, there's a tremendous amount of information from the UBCM and others, and they do talk about, I think to answer some of the questions, they talk about following, laws and regulations, and they do talk about imposing sanctions. They don't really spell out what the sanctions could be, but I suspect that would be up to us to figure out. But the amount of information, this is likely just a portion of all the information that's out there. So I think it's time, and I believe the next council will have to have something like this in place in the first 6 months, so we should get started on it as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. So in terms of how to move forward, is council supportive of having a facilitated session rather than staff coming up with a policy and bringing it to council for review? I think we will get more value out of going through, each of these questions as a guide, adding more in, talking about what's there, what's missing, and building the policy rather than just accepting a policy. Okay.
So move, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Then I will move that council direct staff to begin the process of finding a facilitator to guide council through building a council code of conduct. Seconded by Councillor Paulson. On the motion, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay, and item number 9 from the Director of Development Services and Deputy CAO, we have appointment of approving officer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. So Council is responsible for appointing an approving officer for consideration of subdivision applications. My position is currently the approving officer for the City of Port Alberni. Approving officers are responsible for reviewing, local bylaws, provincial legislation, and case law when considering subdivisions. It's also important to have a deputy approving officer to assist in subdivision applications, and to have that second approving officer available to authorize potential subdivision applications. Mary Ann Wade, our manager of planning, has previous experience as an approving officer and the experience and qualifications. So I'm recommending that council consider appointing her as our deputy approving officer for subdivisions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I love the report, especially the part where it says the approving officer is responsible to review all applicable bylaws. That's my favorite part. Thank you.
As they relate to subdivisions.
As they relate to subdivisions. Councillor Washington, would you like to read the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the council for the City of Port Alberni appoint Mary Ann Wade, Manager of Planning, as the City of Port Alberni's Deputy Approving Officer effective May 9, 2022.
Second, Madam.
Seconded by Councillor Corbeil. Seeing no comments, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Thank you. And moving on to bylaws, item number 1 from the Development Planner, we have proposed official community plan bylaw and zoning bylaw amendments for 4210 Cedarwood.
Good afternoon. Just gonna let this load. Okay. All right, so today we have an application for an amendment to both the official community plan and the zoning bylaw for the property at 4210 Cedarwood Street. So the applicant is proposing to rezone the property to RM3 high density multiple family residential zone and redesignate the property as multifamily residential in the OCP in order to facilitate the development of a 4-story, 35-unit affordable housing residential building funded by BC Housing's Community Housing Fund. So this is a partnership between the Chitapimati Housing Society, BC Housing, and the city. The society is proposing to demolish the vacated Cedarwood School and develop the site with affordable rental housing to address the housing needs identified within the First Nations community. The applicant is requesting to amend the OCP from institutional to multifamily residential. The proposed development aligns with the intent of the multifamily residential designation and is consistent with the surrounding neighborhood. The surrounding neighborhood consists of residential, parks and open space, general commercial, multifamily, and institutional properties. The property is not currently within a development permit area, but if the property is redesignated to multifamily residential, the property would then be added to the development permit area number 1 in the OCP, multifamily residential. For the zoning bylaw, they're also looking to rezone the property from P2 Parks and Recreation to RM3 high-density multiple family residential. Again, this use is consistent with the surrounding neighborhood, which is made up of single-family R1 single-family residential lots, RM2 medium-density multiple family, and the C3 service commercial. So at the development permitting stage, the plan as proposed will require variances to allow greater heights and reduction in parking stalls. So for the site plan, you'll notice, as I said, there are 35 dwelling units. These will range from studios to 4-bedroom units, and 35 parking stalls will be provided along with storage and bike racks. Attached to the residential building will be a 2,034 square foot amenity space for the residents to utilize, and there is also an outdoor gathering space for the residents. So here are 2 renderings for the project. The first one is from the lane looking southwest to northeast. And then the second one is from Cedarwood looking northwest to southeast. Now, looking at the city's strategic plan, we believe this application works to advance 3 strategic priorities. The first is to respond to demographic change, improve quality of life. The development will look to address the housing needs within the First Nations community by providing multi-generational housing for those most in need. The priorities number 2 and 3, enabling the new economy and provide and maintain quality services, will be addressed because the project aims to redevelop the vacant school site at 4210 Cedarwood Street, and by contributing the land to the Chitapi Mati Housing Society, the city is encouraging the redevelopment of a vacant school site for the provision of safe and affordable housing. The Advisory Planning Commission discussed this application on October 13, 2021. They were generally in support of this application. There were comments regarding parking and the effect on the neighborhood based on the applicant's proposal of 33 parking stalls at the time. It has been increased to 35, but the commission supported some potential lowering of the parking requirements. The applicant noted the primary users of the amenity space would be residents and satisfied the members of the APC of any parking requirements, any parking issues as a result of this site. The Advisory Planning Commission also discussed the off-site works and accepted that these details would be addressed prior to final adoption of the bylaw amendments. So the options available to council are A, to proceed to first and second reading of the bylaws and to schedule the public hearing, and B, to provide staff with alternative direction. Staff is in support of this application, and staff recommends option 1. And the motions are both in your agenda package and on the slides. If you have any questions, I'm here to answer them, as well as Walter Hooglin, who's working on behalf of the society.
Thank you very much. And Walter, did you want to add anything on behalf of the society today?
The only thing I want to add is Wally Samuel was going to be here, and he said he had some things to say to council, and he ended up having some COVID issues, and he doesn't
Oh, sorry, come on forward if you don't mind.
So he had COVID, so he couldn't show up. So I talked to him about just before the meeting, and he just said to say to mayor and council how much the House It and the Indigenous urban people here in Port Alberni appreciate the partnerships that have been offered, particularly by the city of Port Alberni and also by BC Housing. This has been a partnership that's stretching out even more to the other Indigenous people, and it's going to be considered a home run simply because of the location, the transportation, and all the other things that are there. And so the big thing Wally said, they're extremely grateful. Just that you're listening to us, and let's see if we can do it.
Thank you, Walter. And I just want to say that we are very proud as a city to be contributing land to this project, and really grateful to the House It First Nation for bringing this concept forward, and following that, of course, to the Chitapi Mati Housing Society that formed for spearheading it. So we are thrilled that BC Housing has funded this, and looking forward to continuing to move through this process. Thank you. Okay, Council, are there any questions? Councillor Washington.
Just a couple comments, Madam Mayor, if I may. When I first read the report, I was concerned about the parking because up there it can get a little busy with all the businesses and the marine guy right there. So just a concern about that. But if 35 works, it works for you. And then I'm also glad that they've been warned that Circle Dairy starts at 4 a.m. in the morning. So hopefully that insulation is very well insulating. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Okay, seeing none. Councillor Soldo, would you like to read the motions?
Okay, Madam Mayor, I move that the official community plan amendment number 384210 Cedarwood Street, is it Chapati?
Chitapi.
Mahati?
Mati.
Mati Housing Society, bylaw number 5051, be now introduced and read a first time.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Seconded by Councillor Corbeil. Seeing no comments, all in favor? Carried, thank you.
This is going to be a test. Number B.
Chitapi Mati.
That zoning map amendment number 494210 Cedarwood Street, Chapati Mahati Housing Society, bylaw number 5052, be now introduced and read a first time.
Thank you. Is there a second? Seconded by Councillor Corbeil. Seeing no comments, all in favor? Carried, none opposed.
C, I move that the official community plan amendment number 384210 Cedarwood Street, Chapati Mahati Housing Society, bylaw number 5051, be read a second time.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Corbeil. Seeing no comments, all in favor? Carried, none opposed.
And D, that zoning map amendment number 494210 Cedarwood Street, Chapati Mahati Housing Society, bylaw number 5052, be read a second time.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Seconded by Councillor Corbeil. Seeing no comments, all in favor? Carried, thank you.
And E, that the official community plan amendment number 384210 Cedarwood Street, Chapati Mahati Housing Society, bylaw number 5051, and zoning map amendment number 494210 Cedarwood Street, Chapati Mahati Housing Society, bylaw number 5052, be advanced to a public hearing on Tuesday, May 31st, 2022 at 6 p.m. in City Hall. Is there more on the bottom there?
No, in Council Chambers. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Corbeil. I think we're going to have to invite Wally Samuel here for our next meeting to tell us how to say Chitapi Mati.
I told you it was a test.
I might be saying it correct, I might not be, but you were trying, that's what matters. On the motion, all in favor? Carried, thank you. And please thank Wally. I hope he's feeling better soon. Yeah. Okay, on to correspondence for action, and we have one item today from the Alberni Valley Drag Race Association. We have a letter dated April 12th requesting council's approval of the Thunder in the Valley Keeping the Dream Alive weekend event. Twyla, is there anything to add on this?
No, I think it's outlined in the communication. It is a branch of what they were doing last year when they did the drive-by in response to COVID. So they continue to keep the charity cruise in play, and they're adding an additional piece being the swap meet.
Thank you very much. Councillor Paulson, would you like to read this motion?
I'd like to move that council authorize the Alberni Valley Drag Racing Society to conduct the Thunder in the Valley, Keeping the Dream Alive event to take place at the Alberni Athletic Hall, beginning with a car show and charity cruise on Saturday, August 6, 2022, and ending with a swap meet on Sunday, August 7th, 2022, subject to the notification of emergency services and BC Transit, consultation with all affected businesses and residents, provision of a route map by June 30th, 2022, implementation of a traffic plan, provision of standard liability insurance, and communicable disease plan in accordance with provincial health orders and guidelines in effect at the time of the event, if applicable.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
I'd be happy to second that, Madam Mayor.
Seconded by Councillor Washington. Any comments?
I'm just happy to see that something's happening, that we're slowly getting back away from our COVID-restricted events, and very pleased to see this, awesome.
Absolutely. And myself and the CAO did meet with the Drag Race Society a couple times several months ago. They were at the time hoping to put on a full event, and it looks like they have not been able to make that work for this year, but we'll keep working with them, and certainly optimistic that they'll be able to for next year. Okay, seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. And one proclamation today, a letter dated May 4th, 2022 from Spark BC, Social Planning and Research Council of British Columbia, requesting that Council proclaim June 4th, 2022 as Access Awareness Day. Would Councillor Haggard like to make that motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move that Council proclaim June 4th, 2022 as Access Awareness Day in the city of Port Alberni.
Seconded by Councillor Poon. Seeing no comments, all in favor? Carried, thank you. Okay, and correspondence for information. Twyla.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So 3 items, one from the Union of BC Municipalities, and it's just bringing council awareness to AVICC supporting the 2 resolutions submitted by Port Alberni Council, that being the Health Canada Increased Cannabis Regulation Resources and Safe and Clean Affordable Housing. So those will be considered at the UBCM. You have correspondence from Rebecca Terapaki regarding the overdose prevention site, and minutes from the Advisory Traffic Committee in draft form.
Thank you very much. Are there any comments or items councillors would like to highlight? Okay. Seeing none, would somebody like to move receipt? Moved by Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Poon. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried, thank you. No report from in camera today. Are there any items councillors would like to highlight from reports? Councillor Corbeil.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to touch on my Kofi report. It started to become a short novel after a while, but the mayor and I attended the Council of Forest Industry convention recently, and it was really quite informative, and it was nice to hear Port Alberni mentioned several times. Once when they were talking about paper excellence in the food paper that they're developing and processing, and as well as the SAN group and their value-added initiatives that they're working on. Break it down into about 3 different topics. There was a lot of people talking about the economy, and for the most part it wasn't overly optimistic. A lot of discussion around inflation, the war, the cost of energy, etc. But the future for the forest industry, I think, looks relatively bright. The building starts, especially in the United States, is pretty solid. I think one of the CEOs actually mentioned an awful lot of single-family houses being built, which utilizes a lot of lumber. And things like the war in the Ukraine. Russia supplies about 10% of the world's wood, and of course, with all the sanctions, they're probably going to be hard pressed to sell very much wood at all. Europe, which had a really difficult time with something similar to what we had in the interior, a bug beetle, destroyed a lot of wood, and they were exporting wood to beat the band. And I guess that's coming to a halt. So we'll see less European wood going into the United States, and be beneficial to Canada to access that market. And lastly, there was a lot of discussion around opportunities, whether it's, wood is green compared to steel or concrete, the opportunities with mass timber, opportunities with, things like Paper Excellence doing with the food paper, and even the opportunities for young folks. They talked about, like every other industry pretty much, it's very difficult to get young people to come to the industry, and there was discussion about, work-life balance, that, in my day, you just went to work and you didn't ask too many questions. From what we understand now, young people ask a lot of questions, and they want to be able to enjoy life as well as work. So all in all, it was very informative, and Madam Mayor, you're an excellent advocate for the forest industry from Port Alberni when we go to these functions, and it was a good couple days. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Corbeil. Really appreciate the report. And if I could just add a couple of brief things. You highlighted the event very well. There were a lot of sessions. A couple of takeaways for me, specifically when the Minister of Forests spoke. One of the pieces she spoke to was BC timber sales reform. And she actually said reform to make way for the value-added sector. This is something that, from the City of Port Alberni's perspective, we have been really advocating for the stability long-term of the value-added sector. We know that companies like the Sand Group rely on BC timber sales, don't have tenure, rely on BC timber sales actually for 90% of the fiber that they turn into high-value products in our community. So the provincial government having an active eye on that is critically important, especially with the old growth deferrals that are happening right now, and as we know, the reduction of the BCTS fiber becoming available. So did have an opportunity to speak with the Minister of Forests as well as some of her staff, and briefly with the Premier about this issue as well. And the Premier mentioned Port Alberni twice in his short remarks, and the Sand Group specifically as well. So we are certainly getting, the notice of the provincial government, and really appreciate that. When I spoke with the Minister of Forests and her ADM, they actually spoke about several local Port Alberni value-added producers. Timber Tiles was one that they mentioned again and again and again, just really as being impressed by the operations and the innovation that's going on there, and recognizing that often the companies in our communities who are investing in the value-added sectors are the companies that don't have tenure, so they're doing it with a lot of risk, not having a regular stream of fiber that they know is coming in, and yet they're doing it anyways. And she actually said these are the type of companies we want to support, and these are the type of investments we want to see in our community. So we were really pleased to have that opportunity, and following that, I did connect with Josie Osborne, our MLA as well, and we are setting up another meeting just to talk in more detail about some of these challenges. Any comments or questions on Kofi? Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Was there any discussion, either formally or informally, of how municipalities can support or continue to support our forest industry? To just continue their long-term...
I would say there was lots of discussion, from presenters, not so much in the kind of larger scale economy pieces, but some of the more like action-oriented, which sectors of the forest industry are growing. There was a lot of talk about municipal buildings being built with mass timber and things like that. And there was a lot of talk of the provincial government needing to incentivize, things around like fiber removal, bringing to pulp mills rather than just having fiber recovery zones. So there were a lot of kind of solutions put forward, and always interesting to see what comes, but I think the provincial government at least is really there listening. The Minister of Forests was there for the whole weekend, which was really nice, and had several staff members there with her as well. So I think it just says a lot that they're there, they're listening, they're a part of the conference rather than just dropping in to speak and leaving. And I think from a municipal perspective, our biggest piece of our role is in advocating when we see challenges for the local companies that we have. But we certainly could be, there's some municipalities that have created wood first policies to be building with wood whenever possible. And there's some opportunities there that we could be copying as well. Thank you. Do you have anything to add to that, Councillor Corbeil?
Well, to answer Councillor Haggard's question, or to add to what you said, there was an awful lot of discussion about consultation with communities, with First Nations, with industry, with labor. Unfortunately, I don't think we've had enough opportunity to be involved in that, and it sounds like that still could come, and I hope it does, because I think it's, for communities like Port Alberni, it's so really so important that we are able to at least, be at the table, so to speak.
Absolutely. And I think that, there was so much talk about the value-added forest sector, and certainly, old growth deferrals are an important topic and important to everyone at that table. But I think that the overall kind of consensus is there is a strong recognition, even from the forest sector and companies that, profit within it, that we need to make sure we're getting as much value as possible out of every tree that is taken out of the forest. And I've been to Kofi before, and that wasn't necessarily the prevailing theme that I took away from Kofi a few years ago. So I saw that as a really positive shift, and spoke with a lot of companies there that are really investing now in value added and investing in ways to clean up the forests more than they have before. And whether that's a result of government, policy changes or not, the sector seems to be making some really positive strides. Okay. Any other items councillors would like to highlight from their reports? Okay. And I did just want to recognize Councillor Haggard. I think you were supposed to come to Kofi and weren't able to, but I believe you did attend the Hooay at Old Growth Summit.
I didn't attend in person, but I watched it on YouTube. It was live streamed.
Yeah.
Yes.
And thank you for attending. It overlapped, and so myself and Councillor Corbeil weren't able to attend. Caught a little bit of it on the virtual platform, but nice to have you there representing us as well.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, we will move on then to new business. Are there any items of new business to bring forward? Sure. Yeah. Pat, we're going to just put you on the spot. Councillor Paulson would like just to give you an opportunity to celebrate the announcement from Coastal Restoration today, if you want to just highlight that for the community.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor. Actually, I think it's an amazing opportunity to celebrate that this is Economic Development Week. And I do thank Council for the proclamation that came forward from the last meeting. It was sent on to BC EDA, and we were the first municipality to do it. So thank you for that. And there is an official proclamation from the provincial government that has been issued. So yes, Coastal Restoration Society. Our MP, Gord Johns, introduced me to their executive director, Josh Temple, Captain Josh Temple, about 4 months ago. And they had outgrown their home in Tofino and were looking for a new hub somewhere between Port Alberni and Parksville, Nanaimo, and Comox. And when I met with Josh, I realized that a couple of things about them. The first was that they really fit with, I think, a pivot in our direction, if you will, from, over the years, over the decades, we have contributed a lot to the country's GDP through extraction industries, forestry and fishing. And I see that we're shifting. It's an organic shift and driven a bit by us, but into restoration and regeneration economies. And coastal restoration definitely represents that. For those that don't know what they do, they recover ghost fishing gear, materials from abandoned aquaculture sites. They harvest very invasive species called the European green crab. And moreover, they set the bar, in my opinion, for organizations that are working with the Indigenous community. The lengths that they have gone to deliver on a promise of partnership with the First Nation community is mind-boggling. And they've just been asked by UVic to be the focus of a documentary on this kind of initiative. Anyway, today, Coastal Restoration Society announced that they are bringing their hub to Port Alberni, and they're making their hub here. They've purchased a building in the community in the uptown area to serve as a temporary home for them while they wait for the Somas lands to develop and hopefully to host them. So it's a thrilling announcement. They normally employ 250 people over the summer period, May to October, at a living wage of $35 an hour. And they are just embarking on some training that will be done with North Island College as of June 9th. There's an opportunity for people to submit their application to Coastal Restoration Society by May 23rd, and they are very focused on training and employment of the Indigenous community. And this was not a pre-arranged message, but jumping to the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pat. And thank you personally for all the work that you did to get coastal restoration here. Yes, we can clap for Pat.
Thank you.
I know that they specifically said to me how much they appreciated and that you personally were a big part of their decision to invest here and the work that you've done for them and the support that you've given them. So thank you. We are very excited to see them setting up in the community.
I'm thrilled they're here. Thank you. And thank you for your support as well, because I do believe that the temporary access agreement that you allowed on the Somas lands was an indication that you were willing to support them here in the community. Thank you.
Okay, we will move on to question period, which is an opportunity for members of the public to ask questions of council. Would any members of the public like to come forward today? Neil, come on forward.
Just two questions. One on the two submissions that were made to the Union of BC Municipalities. I talked twice, Mayor, about my concern about pensioners and retirees or et cetera, and was hoping that maybe you could put a resolution forward to the municipalities who in turn could be an advocate to the provincial and federal government about the increasing of old age pension. I'm taking it that that hasn't happened.
There was a resolution submitted that was similar from the City of Victoria. So that resolution has been supported by our council, and I think we were going to put forward a letter of support for when it goes to UBCM. And Twyla will be able to provide that resolution to you for information if you'd like.
Yes, that would be interesting, because sometimes the more resolutions that go in are also a benefit as well, but I'm glad to hear
actually
that
usually-
one is being submitted.
Yeah, absolutely. They actually usually don't accept duplicate resolutions.
They don't?
But, you know, certainly it's valuable when a resolution passes unanimously at UBCM, which we expect for this one.
So they would combine individual into one resolution, okay. And just one other question, I have lots of questions, but only one today, is on the code of conduct. If I understood you correctly, the committee will consist of council and anyone else other than council, and also there'll be a facilitator. Do you know who that facilitator would be?
No, not at this point. There'll be a discussion on whether we would like that to be an external facilitator or facilitated by a member of our staff. My preference would be that it's a external facilitator, and we would have senior staff there with us.
Right, okay. And because you mentioned you hope this is a meaningful, and I hope this is used in a real productive manner. And it's not only meaningful to council, but it's meaningful to people who want to come here and speak on issues. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Neil. Would any other members of the public like to ask questions today? Come on forward, Monica.
Thank you very much. I would just like to suggest one thing, and that is maybe one of you or all of you would go to Norconda Sandport's office and ask what is happening. I think it would be very interesting and very positive and very exciting what is happening right now. And I think especially for you, Mayor, I really encourage you to do that.
Did you say Sandport?
Yes, it belongs to the Sand Group.
Yeah, we're aware.
And so because Sand Group is such a big group, we have divided it up in different divisions. And I just would like to inform you that very exciting things are happening, and to knock on the door. And I think Port Alberni will be celebrating very soon.
Thank you. And would you mind just stating your name
My name
and
is Monica
address for the
Rose.
record? Thank
Monica
you.
Rose.
And your address?
Pardon me?
Could you state your address just for our records?
Yes, 3981 Exton Street.
Thank you. And I will let you know that we do have regular meetings with the Sand Group. We've also been a part of, or we've seen the announcements that they've made around Sandport. I know that's an evolving project, so I will certainly ask for an update on it. I'm not aware of any new news, but yeah, I know that there's always lots of ideas. Thank you. Okay. Any other questions from members of the public? Seeing none, would somebody like to move adjournment? Moved by Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Poon. All in favor? Carried. Thank you.